My insecurities were the same when I was in monogamous relationships as when I found myself in a non-monogamous relationship. I really quickly realized, actually, this is something I've been feeling my whole life, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the relationships that I was in.
Hello and welcome to Separate Bathrooms. We would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay our respects to the elders both past and present. Hello, I'm Ali Daddo.
I'm Cam Daddo. We've got an interesting show, podcast, chat
We
lined
sure
up for you.
Unlike any other,
Yeah.
I would have to say.
I'm really excited. I feel like we are going up a roller coaster right now. We're heading up the top and we're about to go over the edge.
I love it.
Today we have a couple that identify with being polyamorous.
Yep.
I had to look that up. I wanted to get it right. The dictionary says polyamorous, characterized by or involved in the practice of engaging in multiple romantic and typically sexual relationships with the consent of all the people involved.
Yeah.
Now, I also wrote down here what Google says. A type of ethical non-monogamy. Polyamory involves having romantic relationships with multiple people. Polyamorous relationships are becoming increasingly common, and yet many people falsely believe that polyamory never works or that polyamorous relationships are doomed from the start.
Now this is why we have Siobhan and Rich in. They've got their own podcast that they talk about polyamory, but we are about to talk to them right now. So let's welcome Siobhan and Rich into the bathroom.
Welcome, Siobhan and Rich, to the bathroom. You are on another side of the world to us. How are you guys today?
Great.
Great. Yeah, really good.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
so
Thanks for
excited to
having
be
us.
here.
And you're literally past your dinner time and we've just gotten up and had a cup of tea.
Yes.
Well, actually, we've just had a cup of tea as well, because the
How are you
British
doing?
are massive tea drinkers, as you know.
Absolutely.
So you kind of bookend your day with tea, I've learned.
yeah.
So we've just had our evening tea and you've had your morning tea. So isn't that nice?
Love
We
it.
love it.
Everything's better with tea. I always
Siobhan,
say
where,
that.
where are you
Yes.
from? Where in Australia are you from?
I'm from Sydney originally.
And Rich, you are from the UK, obviously.
I'm from the UK, yeah, from the Midlands to be exact.
So how did a girl from Australia and a boy from the Midlands meet?
Well, the internet.
Good old internet.
We met in the September of 2022, which...
No, 2020.
Oh, Christ. In the September of 2020. And the reason that is significant is because that was a few months that we had between the two major lockdowns here in the UK over the COVID pandemic period. So... yeah, we met sort of when we were allowed out, and then we had to spend a little bit of time separated in the second lockdown. But, I mean, all is possible with the internet and
Pandemic
Hinge.
romance, if you will.
And were you already living in the UK, Siobhan?
So I moved to the UK from Sydney in March of 2020. I actually arrived in the UK 3 days before the big lockdown started.
Oh, okay.
COVID hadn't really kicked off in Sydney when I left. So it was quite a transition to be going on the other side of the world and then living with a bunch of strangers in a London share house, but it all worked out really well. And then 6 months later, I met Richard.
Gotcha.
So we opened up our podcast talking about this label of polyamorous. We are curious about how you guys make it work. So I had to go to the dictionary to get a dictionary meaning of what polyamorous went. I also went to Google. And so I'm curious, guys, were you polyamorous before you met, or did this all happen after you met?
No, we were monogamous for the first, year or so, I would say. When we first met, like, the idea was probably as alien to us as it may be to you guys now, even maybe even more so, because I feel like in the last sort of two years or so, it's kind of become a bigger part of the social discourse. I think as time went on, I personally always felt like something was not quite fulfilled in my life. And through university friends, I was still studying at the time, just started having these discussions about this thing called polyamory. And the more we spoke about it, the more I was like, this really resonates with me. It really sounds like me. Fast forward a few months after this idea had come into my life, I realized that it was very much me and decided to have the big conversation with Siobhan, which was terrifying, to say the least.
Yeah. And Siobhan, for you, what was that first discussion like when Rich approached you with this idea of polyamory?
I actually, when Richard said, it kind of came out to me in this way, I sort of said to him, I'm shocked, and because I'm trying to work out what this means to me, but I'm not surprised. And the reason for that was because I always felt as though there was a part of Richard that I didn't quite know about. When Richard told me this, we'd been together for 15 months. So we were living together. I was a stepmother to his child. So we had a lot of intimate experiences, but I knew that there was something that was missing, that I wasn't quite getting to the bottom of that chest, so to speak. And Richard also described it to me as his orientation, something that is fixed for him. It's not a lifestyle choice. And that was something that was new to me. I had never heard someone describe to me a relationship orientation in a similar way to how someone might describe their sexuality. It's not a choice for Rich. And so for me, it was definitely... it was a really challenging thing to learn about, because for me, our polyamorous relationship is a choice. I've been happy monogamous. I'm happy polyamorous. And so for me, I had to sit down and decide, is it a mind shift or is this something that is not for me? Maybe I'm oriented monogamously. And so I decided not to make a decision and just to see what happened and treat it as an experiment. And 2.5 years later, I'm still here. So I suppose I've made that decision.
Yeah.
Back to that idea of the chest. Ali and I have been together for over 30 years, and I don't think we're still at the bottom of the chest yet. That's what I love
good.
about it.
That's
Yeah.
good.
I actually really like that because we're still discovering, and I think, and we're still curious.
I think the contents of the chest are always changing as well, right?
Yes.
There you go. It's a dynamic thing.
It's a magic chest.
You have a magic chest.
Nicely done.
So my question was, is it still in experimental stage? You said it's dynamic, so it's still a movable feast. Is that right?
One of the joys of polyamory is that it's always going to be experimental to a degree, not in the sense of does it work, but how, in what ways does it work? We were just saying about the whole chest thing and how you're always exploring, right? I think that is true of all relationships, or in my opinion should be, looking to explore more and learn more about each other and grow together, etc. So yes and no is the answer to the question, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yes in some ways, no in others.
Rich, can you just go a little deeper into that discovery for yourself as knowing that you identify as polyamorous? Like, what was the feeling in monogamy that didn't quite sit well with you? Can you sort of explain the difference?
I think that in past relationships, I never really wanted to necessarily break up with anyone. Like, I didn't feel that way, but I felt like there was something else left unexplored that couldn't necessarily be fulfilled by that existing relationship, maybe. So, and once again, it is a very tangible thing. It's hard to put into words, in the way that a lot of things about our relationships are hard to put into words. But to kind of talk about how it sort of feels when you first discover this new thing about you, it's very difficult when there is no playbook.
Yeah.
To be a gay person, for example, like, we know that gay people have existed forever, and it's something that slowly has become more and more accepted over years. But polyamory, when I found out about it, still isn't really being talked about, but even less so. So you don't really know what to do. You don't really know if this is okay or not. But when I was having those discussions with friends and colleagues at university, it was like just a huge light bulb moment where I was like, okay, so there are other people out there like me. There are other ways of doing relationships, and it is okay. If it felt validated for the first time.
If I may add to that, Rich, and just having experienced non-monogamy myself, but also watching you go through exploring your identity when you first told me, there's two key elements. The first one is an element of shame that non-monogamous people in general, and we're speaking about polyamory today, feel. There is something wrong with me. I'm the only one. Why can't I have the relationships that I'm looking for? Because there is such an element of shame. People don't talk about it. And something that is inextricably linked to that is a genuine safeguarding concern. Some people, a lot of non-monogamous people, are unable to safely speak about their relationship orientation for fear of losing their jobs, losing family members, losing custody of their children, not being able to have rental accommodation, buying a house. There are multiple levels of discrimination that people face. And to this day, in both Australia and the UK, relationship orientation and alternate families of any other description are not protected by law. So your employer can dismiss you for being a moral risk to the company because you're in a non-monogamous relationship. So we're in an extremely privileged position because we can talk about that. There's many intersectional identities that we hold that mean that we can speak about it publicly. But for Richard going through that experience of discovering this about himself, at every step of the way, there are barriers that you have to get over and accept yourself to be part of this thing and this identity that you might otherwise be quite scared, and rightly scared, to admit that you hold.
So what about for you then, Siobhan? Are you, this is Rich's
Identity.
Yeah. Thank you, Al. Where do you sit with it? Do you have other partners as well?
Yeah. Rich always said to me that this was something that he wanted to do, but that there would be no limitations for myself as well. And when I say no limitations, I probably should say that when we form our relationship agreements, we have always had equal access to those agreements. So there's not something unequal. For example, there was never a time where Rich could date and I couldn't. We focus on forming freedom-based relationships rather than free-for-alls, which is a key distinction because I think a lot of people think that polyamory is a bit of a free-for-all. And the distinction there is that you communicate openly and that you build freedom-based relationships. And actually that can be the same for literally any relationship. Like if you're monogamous, you should be probably forming relationship agreements as well. Everyone does it. It's just there's an emphasis, as you can imagine, in non-monogamy because if you're having multiple relationships, you need to be able to communicate what's going on in all of those to yourself, to your other partners as well, so that you're giving freely. So I do date other people, Rich dates other people. Because we are polyamorous, we do not have emotional or sexual exclusivity with our relationships. The key difference there is that is different to open relationships. Open relationships often have a focus on sexual relationships, but maybe necessarily have limitations on whether they can fall in love or have like full-blown emotional connections with people. In polyamory, we don't have that limitation. So we can fall in love. We can meet other partners' families. We can go on holidays with them. We can form family with them in a way that we choose. Yeah, it's definitely something I never thought I'd do. Let me tell you that much. When Rich and I first met, I said, I'm not interested in doing that. I don't know why I thought I'd bring it up because I'd never brought it up in any other relationship. So I think I probably just had this sense that this was what Rich was like. Opening my relationship and opening myself to non-monogamy has been one of the most transformative experiences of my life. And I'm very grateful that I had maybe the confidence or the guts at the time to give it a go.
There are some boundaries and rules, I would imagine, that you've set up. Did you set them up from the get-go, or how did you work that part out?
Yeah, so...
The Jessica Fern Book Club.
Yeah, the Jessica Fern Book Club. But there's a writer called Jessica Fern. She wrote a book called Polysecure, and that's our first foray, if you will, into polyamory was sort of facilitated by this book that we read in tandem. So out loud to one another, sort of taking it in turns, which was really therapeutic and like super, like I'd recommend you do it with any partner or partners that you have. It really kind of helped us set our expectations, learn about it just in a general way, explore our attachment styles, and that sort of allowed us to form these agreements. So I think it was probably during that read through that we realized we need to get this written down. We need a sort of to use the less sexy term, a contract of sorts, to sort of less sexy, but very important. And I think we always define them as boundaries rather than rules, because it's about kind of what we're comfortable with, not about sort of restricting what your partner can and can't do.
We literally have a one-pager on Google Docs. That was something I suggested to Rich. I said, look, let's get this down in writing. And
did we sign it? I can't remember if we signed it.
No, we didn't. We weren't that nerdy about it. Jeez. But no, yeah, we wrote it down. It was really helpful exercise. And then, to this day, if something comes up and it changes, we sit down and say, okay, this doesn't serve us anymore.
Yeah. It's a working
document. Yeah.
I'm sure, Siobhan, when you first came across this might have been like my head's exploding. How do I make this work? Because along with that loving emotion often is insecurities, jealousies. I saw you looking at that girl while you're looking at her, sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit of that for me?
I would
please.
love to, guys, because I've literally been on this journey. I learned very quickly in the non-monogamy journey that my insecurities were the same when I was in monogamous relationships as the same when I found myself in a non-monogamous relationship. That was extremely eye-opening for me. I thought I always used what I have started calling the monogamy band-aid, which was I was getting all my validation from this person that had chosen me and I was really special, so that must mean that I'm amazing and special. But I've not once did I look within to feel that validation. So I was walking around the world looking for people to validate my insecurities and to prove to me that I was, good enough and that I was special enough to be worthy of their attention and love. So then all of a sudden, when the monogamy band-aid was ripped off, I really quickly realized, oh my God, actually, this is something I've been feeling my whole life and it has absolutely nothing to do with the relationships that I was in. So for me, polyamory has been a largely personal journey. Yeah, I've dated people. I'm still dating people, but it has been largely a personal journey because I've had to unpack where that insecurity came from so that, yeah, sure, I can thrive in a polyamorous relationship, but that I could thrive as a human being. The way I was living was not really serving me. I didn't feel good about myself. And I was in a relationship where I was feeling really loved and validated, but it was because of monogamy. And I ultimately didn't want to live that way. And it just took Rich coming out to me to show me that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I think with non-monogamy, people say, or maybe they think, if you feel jealous, then you shouldn't do it. You're not good at it. Or if you feel an emotion that's negative, you shouldn't do it because, well, obviously that's not a good idea. But no one would ever say the reverse. If you're feeling insecure or anxious or jealous, we're not very good at monogamy, so maybe you should go and do polyamory, that'll fix it. So if you reverse that, it's not really valid. So really, when you're looking at the way you're feeling in relationships, it is absolutely about what you're carrying within you. Your responses are what's going on inside of you. It doesn't mean that you don't have people that do provoke things that aren't being fair to you. That is absolutely true. But it is about introspection in the first instance and then going outward from there.
So tell me about, obviously you have other partners as well. Why the two of you together? Like, what is it about each other? Clearly you live together. You've had this agreement together. I guess you're the foundation for each other.
Yeah, that's a pretty good term. I think it's a term we've used as well. I think because we both sort of started this journey more broadly together, we feel that there's a security there with one another that maybe we are unlikely to find, or certainly wouldn't find quickly with anyone else. Yeah, there's a trust there. There's a deeper understanding that will no doubt exist for longer because obviously we've been together for longer. So there's an aspect of that, and I think once again it's these tangible things that are very hard to put into words. It just feels right, that we're kind of each other's bases, if you will. And that's not to imply any kind of hierarchy. We don't have emotional hierarchy. There is certainly some natural structural, not say natural, sort of natural in the sense that it just kind of happened, structural hierarchy because we live together and
parent together,
etc. So I think just having that sort of secure base for us just works really well. It's not true for everyone. You have relationship anarchists or solo polyamorists who are sort of, they don't sort of have any hierarchy whatsoever. This is the beauty of it. There's so many different
permutations.
Yeah. So many different structures that could exist for different people.
For our listener out there that's sort of going, oh, this is interesting, I'm curious about this. Would it work with two people that have never identified with polyamory?
I think it would. I suppose I can speak to this. I just imagine if Rich, we know people, we've spoken to a lot of people that don't necessarily identify in their core with non-monogamy. It's something that it might be more of a choice. For example, a person like me. It's quite common that people are married for a long time and they say, hey, I'm keen to explore with other people or, have group sex or whatever. And these are all forms of non-monogamy. Another really common occurrence is when one member of a relationship realizes that they might have same or different sex attraction. So a different attraction to the sex that they're with. And so they want to explore that as well. So it's really normal for people to not have to do away with a relationship that is so important and dear to them to be able to explore this. Something that is really critical that people often don't know is that it's actually an option. So often we are presented with monogamy as being the default and being the only option. And for people to know that there is an option to safely explore these things can be really powerful. So if someone was listening and they don't really identify with it, but they kind of fancy giving it a go, the best thing to do is to skill up, have a read. There's plenty of resources out there. There's a great podcast called the Poly Podcast that you can listen to.
Hint, hint, hint. Yes.
But there's many books, there's articles growing more and more. You can go to your partner and explain what you're looking for and open up a dialogue in that way and explore together. Communicate. What do you want to get out of this? Why do you want to do this? And then build your relationship from there. Esther Perel, who's a very well-known TED talker and also relationship guru, she says we will all have different relationships in our lives. Some of us will have many relationships with the same person. Yep. So are you open to changing and growing within that relationship? I'm sure the two of you have had different phases of your relationship and your marriage.
Many.
And that's the point, right? So being open to that change is important if that's what you're looking for. Cheeky smile between the two of you there.
Well, I don't know if you picked it up. You said, I'm sure you've had many different phases or something in your relationship, and Alice just gone, many.
Yeah. Which I love. I absolutely love that. I think that's why we're still together, because it's never boring. Because I've gone through so many changes. I think probably maybe even more than you in a way. I don't know. But yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point. What about with your other partners? Do you tell them that you are polyamorous, and do your other partners, do they ever get jealous that there is Siobhan at home or Rich at home? Is that tricky?
Most of people that we've seen in the past and or present are polyamorous themselves, so they know the deal. I've never really come across anyone that's had a problem with it so far, which has been nice. Put it this way, you have to be upfront about it right away.
Yeah.
That's the ethical part of ethical non-monogamy, the consensual part. You can't be ethical without the consent part. First thing you mention is your own relationship orientation, the way that you already do relationships, etc. You basically start another relationship agreement with those people. It's the same with everyone. So I'm sure there's elements of jealousy from other partners. Like, it's a normal human emotion that everyone feels. It's about how you deal with it. The thing that I say a lot is to acknowledge it without nurturing it.
To quote myself, I say...
Quote myself. I'm very wise. No, I'm joking. But no, seriously, don't nurture it. Sort of acknowledge it and figure out where it's coming from, because 100% of the time it will be coming from within. It's never an external source that's causing that jealousy, right?
How have your families reacted to this? Clearly they would know.
Good question. Well, when Richard told me that he was non-monogamous, I had not seen my family in nearly 2 years because, the pandemic. And I did have an emergency trip home to Sydney for 3 weeks to get some space and work out what on earth was going on in my life. And because of that sort of raw emotion, of course, what does every girl do? She calls her mum and she says, Mum, I'm coming home for Christmas, basically. And so my sister is a psychotherapist. So when she found out about this, she said, okay, I'm going to go through my psychotherapist brain of the file where non-monogamy was. And she's like, I actually didn't study this at all. I don't really know anything about this. My mum was like, what is this? So they, and my father as well, all bought books about non-monogamy and read up on it to find out what was going on. And Rich's family has also been really supportive. They all know it's not a secret. A lot of them listen to the podcast as well. So to say we've been extremely lucky is an understatement. A lot of non-monogamous people are not out to their families. They do not talk about it. Imagine going through a breakup but not being able to tell your family and friends what you were feeling, not being able to access the support of your network and feeling like that love that you have in your network is conditional. It's pretty rough. So we're really lucky that we've got the support that we do. Mm.
You've got your podcast, right? So I'm sure you're dealing with a lot of aspects of polyamory. How do you counsel people whose families do know about it and they've been judged by it?
That is a difficult question. We've always maintained on our podcast that we're not experts. We are two people that wanted to share our journey and just look at as many different aspects of we can, not just related to polyamory, but also just non-monogamy as a whole, because as we say, there's lots of different types of non-monogamy, but also other things relationship related through a non-monogamous lens, through a polyamorous lens. The key point there being that we don't want to present ourselves as experts because we're not. When it comes to counseling others, we're always very careful not to give any sort of, we're not instructive, we're not a how-to. So it's more about how do our experiences comfort those people, make them feel validated. I think validation is certainly where to begin with that.
Yeah, and you're right. We have sort of spoken to a lot of people. Some of our partners, past and present, aren't out to their families. Mm-hmm. So there is a huge element of peer support in non-monogamy. Huge. So often when you're dating somebody, they might also come to you with a problem about another relationship. That's not weird. That's kind of normal, and particularly in the current climate, expected. You do have to figure out how much you're going to take on, and that can be a challenge because, again, there's no social script. So how do you know how much to take on about your partner's girlfriend's problems, So there's definitely sort of an element of working that out together. But, I mean, in terms of what to do if someone doesn't support that, I think it transcends relationship structure. So many of us in monogamous relationships, our families will not agree with our partner because of religion or sexuality or gender, political views, whatever. There's so many things. And how would you deal with it in that situation? You would probably counsel your friend or family member to find community, to find the people that are living the same experiences as them. We found huge strength in that in our podcast, and we always suggest that people do the same.
How has polyamory enriched your lives and deepened the connections with each other and others around you?
I think the first thing I would say, and once again, something that definitely translates to all relationships, but I think is even more enhanced and more encouraged within polyamory, is communication. I really feel like I'm always a little bit, I cringe a little bit whenever I sort of hear about people who are very defensive when a partner displays any kind of interest, whether it just be, oh, they're attractive, about anyone outside of their relationship, and they're kind of very defensive. We don't have that, put it that way. Like,
never really had that, actually. Yeah.
To be fair, we've never really had that, even when we were monogamous. That kind of transparency, and that's just one example, but that sort of transparency between your partner or partners is like so empowering. So you just feel like you can be your full untethered self with that person. You don't have anything to hide. I just find that really enriching, and really, I feel it bolsters your relationship so much, because you're just like, I can do and be myself.
Yeah. There's so much for me that has enriched my life. Something that I am really grateful for is the ability to have connections with people that enrich different parts of myself. So a really basic example that I love to use is that Richard doesn't drink. I love a glass of vino. Like, find me a King Valley, Pinot Grigio or an Eden Valley Riesling any day. Like, happy to have it. Hunter Chardonnay, I'm your gal. But it's...
How many wines are you going to name?
I'll just keep going.
It's
all for promotion, right? I'll just do it. Tyrrells, if you're listening. No, so Rich and I don't go out for dates and share a bottle of wine over dinner. But I love that. So when I'm with other partners, I can do that. And like, that's a very, very superficial sort of basic example, but I get to enjoy and enrich that part of myself with somebody else. And so I do feel like I am a more fulfilled and more full version of myself because I'm able to explore connections with other people, whatever they may be. A lot of people I've just grown to have stronger friendships with. I've not actually fallen madly in love with anyone since we've opened our relationship. I've not been on a holiday with anyone, but because I'm able to do it, I'm able just to connect with people and see what happens and explore a new part of myself along the way. And so I'm really, really grateful for that.
It opens up those possibilities as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, the fact that those possibilities could exist is just exciting. Like, every day you don't know who you might meet, and you can let it organically grow. You don't have to put any stoppers on things.
Yeah.
That's quite a
I will say, that's not to say that you don't have that in monogamy. Obviously you have that in monogamy. Like, I've always had a very rich network of friends, and that was the case years ago. It's the case now. And it's not that to have those, they have to be romantic. I think it's more that you've got this mindset of being open to connecting with new people. So that mindset then promotes that further in your life. But again, I think that just transcends relationship structure. Like, having that open mindset of building connections outside of your, whether it's a primary relationship, a monogamous relationship, a polyamorous relationship like ours, I just think makes you happier.
I mean, this is a very base question. How many partners do you each have outside of your own?
It has changed a bit.
It's changed a lot.
Technically, as it stands, I actually don't have any additional external. But I think at one point I was seeing 3 other people.
Yeah.
Apart from Siobhan.
And Siobhan, what about you?
So recently, and I actually spoke about this in our last episode of the pod, I was dating someone that I thought I was going to like really, really fall in love with. And they actually had a complication in their nesting relationship. So they weren't able to form like a new relationship in the way that we both wanted. So for the first time in my life, I'm trying to be friends with an ex, which is very exciting. So trying to nurture a transition. It's very normal that relationships in non-monogamy do transition from romantic to friendship and back again or whatever. So I'm like trying to practice what I preach, being friends with an ex. I think it will probably be a bit more of what a lot of people will call a romantic friendship, where there's like an element of romance, whether that's like emotional or physical, who's to say. But I'm sort of exploring that at the moment. So wish me luck on my friendship with an ex journey, guys, because it's brand new for me.
Sounds like a good episode for the pod,
Yeah.
I would say. It's been so interesting talking to you. Thank you so much for your honesty and your vulnerability. It's really explained so much more than what I think a lot of people just think polyamory is. It's just like, hey, how lucky you guys get to have sex with other people. Whoa, from what you've explained correctly, it's been really fascinating. We do finish up with something called the 2-minute shower. it's just sort of keeping your answers short. We'll ask the same question to both of you and we'll just finish up in that way.
Amazing. Love it.
Question number 1. What is it about your relationship that makes you feel most grateful?
Emotional support.
Still mine. Probably sort of her open mindset lends itself to exploration. I like that.
What the world needs more of is...
The world needs more understanding and an open mind to understand something that might be different from your own experience.
Oh, this is tricky because I know what it needs less of.
Okay, do that.
What it needs less of?
Yeah.
Ego.
Okay.
That's a good one. Well
It
done.
needs less ego, not more ego.
One word to describe each other.
Can you use a hyphenate?
Yeah. course you can.
Multifaceted.
Ooh, love it.
Multifaceted. Okay.
God.
God, that was it. That's you,
it.
Rich.
Nah.
You've done it.
That was me that said God.
No. Nurturing.
I love that.
That's nice.
But you have to be that multifaceted and nurturing in order to do what you're doing and live the way you are. It's been incredibly insightful, Siobhan and Rich. Thank you so much for joining us. Your podcast is the Poly Podcast, available on all platforms, I imagine.
Yes.
Wherever you get yours.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, and good luck.
Thanks so much, guys. It's really great to meet you.
How do you feel after listening to that?
Well, that was really interesting. That
Was it what you
really,
expected?
it was not, well, I wasn't sure what to expect, actually, to be honest. You know, I've heard that word tossed around but I never, fully understood that it was something that you, like from what Rich was saying, you identify as that. So it's not necessarily, it's a choice, but it's also an identity in a lot of ways. And he feels at home with who he is now. And he's found a partner that is willing to explore that as well and support him, and they're happy. So all is good.
All is good when you've got someone who's understanding.
Yeah, no one's getting
clearly
hurt.
She hadn't thought of that before, and that she's made the shift into that world. Because I kept thinking, I know you know that he's another man thinking about Rome. You know, I'm thinking about...
I actually thought the same thing because back then...
Yes.
Well, was it polyamorous or was it just like they had multiple sex partners?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I can only go
That
on
is
what
different.
Spartacus looking at that or bloody,
well, then that's
Gladiator.
just-
Yeah. So you just don't, I don't know. But I mean, if you're going to do it, you have to be involved with people that are open to it and are accepting of it without judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something to, I guess, stay open to and let that percolate, I reckon.
Yeah, it's an interesting chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts about us.
Absolutely.
You can hit us up on socials or however you want to reach us.
Yeah.
Send us a pigeon with a note on its attached to its foot. We wouldn't mind.
No, probably through the socials or
Props.
yeah. That's the best way. I'm at Cameron Daddo. Ali's at Ali.
Ali Daddo.
Ali
Yeah,
Daddo.
easy to find. Well, thanks so much for listening, and hopefully we've given you some food for thought.